The original space race was a contest between superpowers. The United States and the Soviet Union competed for prestige, military advantage, and ideological supremacy during the Cold War, and every rocket that left the launch pad represented a government flexing its muscle. Today's space race looks completely different. It's being led by private companies that started out with government contracts but are increasingly setting their own agendas, driven by profit rather than national pride. SpaceX has launched more rockets in recent years than most entire countries have managed across their entire spaceflight history. In 2026 alone, the company has already deployed over 1,300 satellites in just 6 months, on pace to add roughly 3,000 by year's end, a launch cadence no government space agency on the planet can currently match. While the world was busy watching billionaires launch rockets for fun, something much bigger was happening in silence. Private companies aren't just helping governments in space anymore. They're quietly replacing them. Right now, SpaceX alone operates more than 10,700 active satellites in orbit, more than every government on Earth combined. Over 10 million people in more than 160 countries depend on a single private company for their internet connection. This isn't science fiction. This is the quiet transfer of power from governments to corporations in the final frontier. And the consequences could reshape warfare, communication, global commerce, and international law for decades to come. Starlink now delivers high-speed internet to millions of users around the world, including in war zones, remote islands, and regions where governments simply cannot or will not provide reliable service. That's not a hypothetical scenario. It's already happened in practice. When Iran's government shut down internet access to suppress anti-government protests, Starlink access was activated to give citizens a way around the blackout. In active conflict zones, Starlink terminals have become essential battlefield infrastructure, keeping communications running when traditional networks go down. Meanwhile, Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, and a growing list of other private players are racing to develop reusable rockets, space tourism flights, and lunar landing capabilities of their own. This isn't a monopoly story. It's a story about how quickly control over critical infrastructure has shifted from public institutions to private boardrooms, largely without public debate or a vote. This shift carries profound strategic, economic, and ethical implications. Private companies can move faster, innovate more aggressively, and take risks that governments typically avoid because of political, budgetary, and bureaucratic constraints. That speed is exactly why they've pulled so far ahead. But it comes at a cost. These companies operate under fundamentally different incentives, focused primarily on profit, shareholder returns, and long-term market dominance, rather than national interest or public accountability. Whether or not that scenario ever plays out, the mere fact that it's now technically possible represents a fundamental shift in how national security actually works. The economic impact of all this is just as transformative. Cheap, reliable access to space is enabling entirely new industries. Global high-speed internet, space tourism, asteroid mining, satellite manufacturing, and real-time Earth observation that used to be the exclusive domain of national intelligence agencies. Companies that control this orbital infrastructure will hold enormous influence over the global economy for decades to come. Developing countries that once relied on expensive government-run space programs, or had no space capability at all, are now turning to private providers for services they could never have afforded to build themselves. That's genuinely useful in the short term, but it's also quietly creating a new form of technological dependence that could last for generations, with a handful of companies effectively becoming landlords of the sky. The regulatory environment is struggling badly to keep pace with this rapid privatization of space. International space law was written in an era when only governments operated beyond Earth's atmosphere. It simply wasn't built for a world where private companies launch thousands of satellites a year. Today, commercial activity is pushing the boundaries of what's legally and ethically acceptable faster than lawmakers can respond. Issues like space debris, orbital congestion, property rights on the moon and asteroids, and the militarization of space are becoming more urgent by the month as commercial activity explodes, and there's still no clear global framework for resolving most of them. There's also a growing environmental dimension to this story that rarely makes it into the conversation. Every rocket launch releases significant amounts of carbon, black carbon, and other pollutants directly into the upper atmosphere. A part of the atmosphere that's far more sensitive to pollution than the lower layers most climate discussions focus on. As the number of launches increases dramatically, so does that environmental cost. The long-term sustainability of space activity at this scale is a question governments, companies, and scientists are only just beginning to take seriously, even as launch numbers keep climbing year after year. Looking ahead, the privatization of space is likely to accelerate even further. New players from India, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and other nations are entering the market with ambitious plans of their own, turning what was once a two-country race into a genuinely global, multipolar competition. The real question isn't whether this new era arrives, it's already here. The question is whether it leads to greater innovation, opportunity, and scientific discovery, or to new forms of corporate dominance, inequality, and conflict playing out hundreds of kilometers above our heads. The shift from government to private control in space is one of the most significant, underreported stories of our time. It represents a fundamental change in how humanity operates beyond Earth, and more importantly, who actually gets to make the rules out there. The decisions being made today in boardrooms, launch sites, and investment meetings will determine not just who profits from the final frontier, but what kind of future gets built there, and whether the rest of us ever get a say in it. This is the real new space race, and it's happening right now, whether governments and the public are paying attention or not. The coming decade will test whether private enterprise can responsibly manage the final frontier, or whether we're about to see new forms of conflict and exploitation in orbit that make past struggles on Earth look simple by comparison. What do you think? Should private companies have this much control over critical infrastructure with essentially no public oversight? Let me know in the comments, and if this made you see the space industry differently, subscribe, because the stakes here could not be higher.